Welcome to the Divorce Podcast, where we explore all aspects of ending relationships, separation, and parenting apart. If your marriage or partnership has ended, or you have friends and family who are separating, this podcast is for you. I'm Kate Daly, a relationship counsellor, divorce specialist, and co-founder of Amicable, the online legal service for separating couples. In each episode, we look at relationships and separation from different angles, including the emotional, legal, and social. I'm joined by experts and special guests who share their own unique stories, experience, and tips, with the goal of helping people end relationships in a kinder and better way. In this episode, I'm joined by Andrew Keefe, psychodynamic psychotherapist and Pilates teacher, to discuss how Pilates can support you during a divorce and aid your recovery afterwards. We begin by exploring what trauma actually means in the context of divorce and the physical and mental symptoms. Andrew explains the biological responses that often occur during and after a traumatic event like a separation, and how the controlled movements and breathing techniques at the core of Pilates can help soothe these reactions. He also shares other practical strategies for coping with divorce and separation, including simple breathing exercises, staying active, and how to build a supportive network. If you loved this episode, then please subscribe and rate us on your preferred listening platform. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks very much. It's lovely to be here.
It's great to have you with us. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I thought we'd start. The context, if you like, of this podcast is to talk about divorce, trauma, and Pilates and how those three things intersect. So I guess maybe to start with, we should do some term defining. So talk a little bit first, Andrew, if you would, about trauma and what we mean by trauma in this context.
Well, often when people hear the word trauma, they think about post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a very specific diagnosis, a very specific set of symptoms related and one of the criteria for that condition is that somebody has to have gone through a violent or life-threatening experience. Now, not everybody getting divorced will have been going through a life-threatening or violent experience. Some people may have done. But if you think about trauma in a broader context, the word derives from an ancient Greek term, which means to mark or to rub. So it really means an experience which has rubbed off on somebody or marked someone, changed them. So I think within psychotherapy more generally, we think of a broader understanding of trauma. And certainly going through at the end of a long relationship, a divorce, everything that goes with that, which everybody listening, I'm sure yourselves will be very familiar, it will be a life-affecting, life-changing, life-altering experience that will leave a mark on you. So within that sense, I think we can talk about trauma. But in another sense, the other thing to remember is that when it comes to the nervous system, the body, the brain, the way that we as humans cope with stressful experiences, we only have one system. We use the same system to respond to an actual violent trauma, such as like a car crash or an assault. We use that system, the same system, to respond to stressful life events, such as going through a divorce or having difficulties at work or falling out with your boss. We use the same system. So the physiological responses in terms of what it can feel like when you're in that condition, there's a lot of overlap. Trauma is a physical experience, so we often feel it, but in elevated heart rate, tense muscles, the emotional disturbance, and we can feel both of those. I think if you're going through a trauma or if you're going through a stressful life event, I can go into what that system is and how it works. But the final thing for me, I think what marks out a traumatic experience and one that's just simply a difficult experience is the idea of repetition. Part of trauma in the more formal sense is that the experiences of the incident, whatever it was, get stuck in a part of the brain that doesn't understand time or place, called the amygdala, like the brain's alarm system. And so if something happens to remind you of the incident years later, the amygdala will think the same incident is happening again. So you will feel the same things that you felt the first time. And I think that this does happen. I can think of, for instance, people talk about within a divorce proceedings, every time they realize they've had an email from the other side's lawyer, I get that icy feeling in my stomach, my heart starts to beat, I get that my muscles tense up. That's repetition, because part of the experience has been stuck in the amygdala again. And that's when we start to think about, to simply have a bad day, you get up the next day, you put it behind you. But this is something different. It stays in the body, stays in the nervous system, and it repeats.
So is that what we mean because we hear sometimes, don't we, therapists refer to this idea of the body holding trauma and, holding on to it. Is that what we actually mean, that it's embedded in the nervous system, the response, and it can be triggered?
Absolutely. So because the amygdala, the alarm system, it's there to detect threat in the environment. And then if it detects a threat, it's there to organize our defense through what we call the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or submit sort of process. And if, for instance, the amygdala decides the best thing to do in the situation is to fight or to run, fight or flight, it triggers in the body the same process that the body would go through to warm up for a run. So send stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, heart starts to beat more quickly, the lungs start to breathe more quickly, get more oxygen in through the air, get that pumped around to the working muscles. The working muscles contract so that you're ready to go. You're ready to actually fight somebody or run away from them, or fight the danger or run away from it. And every time the trauma repeats, every time you're reminded of, every time you're triggered in common language, that same process happens again. And if you think about what I mean when by trauma in the body, if you think about, obviously, one of the things that happens, the muscles contract, so we're getting ready for action like this. When a muscle contracts, there are proteins within the fibers within the muscle, which myosin and actin, they're called, and they move, they slide over each other. So the fibers get shorter, and that's how the muscle contracts or gets shorter. So what I mean when I talk about trauma in the body, I'm talking about this idea that there's a shock, there's a scare, the signals that are sent into the body, they get down into the proteins inside the muscle, the fibers inside the muscles, gets down to that level, as well as the entire, or through doing that, the entire nervous system gets lit up and put on high alert. I think of it as a physical experience. I mean, I was a psychotherapist long before I became a personal trainer and a Pilates teacher, and I did that because I was finding that myself increasingly, I was managing my own kind of stress through exercise, and I was finding it a deeply relaxing, calming experience. But then didn't realize when you train to be a PT, you have to learn a huge amount of anatomy and physiology, understandably, if you think about it, so that you understand how the body is supposed to work, so we can get people to exercise, get fit safely. And that completely changed the way I think about trauma. Now, I had a real revelatory moment, realized what we're actually talking about is a physical experience, because it starts off with an alert, an alarm, some sort of signal there's a danger, but then the body is recruited through stress hormones, through the neuromuscular system. The body is recruited to respond to the danger and make us safe. And that's what I mean.
Yeah. So it's fascinating. I'd never thought about that connection between the physical body and trauma before. If you put that in the context of a divorce, what sort of things in a divorce are happening to you that trigger some of that traumatic response then? What comes first, the event of the trauma or the physical response? How does it work specifically in the context of a divorce?
In lots of different ways, I imagine. I suppose if there's been sort of abuse or violence or coercive control, violence within the marriage or within the relationship, and that's what's causing the divorce, then it's very obvious, how in terms of having to deal with the other partner and the kind of encounters with the partner will remind you of things that have happened, were actually done and happened, and that which will be triggering. It might be if somebody had had difficult experiences of legal processes in the past or of relationship breakdown in the past, etc. Then there might be, as you're going through the new divorce, there'll be things that will be reminding you of the earlier incidences, and you'll be feeling those again. I often say to clients when I meet them that trauma is a bit like there's two parts of your mind. In one part of your mind and your nervous system and your body, you know that it's a beautifully sunny day in London and life is okay and is good and you're at the age that you are. In another part of your mind, nervous system, body, you're still 8 years old or 6 years old or 10 years old or 25 and going through a much more difficult time. And sometimes the younger part can kind of wake up and you can begin to experience life again through your younger body or your nervous system. And I think that can happen in divorce because of the stress, the pressure, the situations.
It might be your early response to conflict or not getting your own way or fear of the future or fear of financial destitution or whatever. You might be harboring lots of things that are nothing to do necessarily with the nuts and bolts of what's happening in the here and now, but are connected to the here and now by past traumatic experience or fears and things.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
So part of the therapeutic work is to help somebody be fully in the present so that they can respond to what's going on through their adult grown-up functioning, resilient self, rather than through younger parts that might be sort of scared or frightened to begin with before they even get in the door.
Well, you can see that's massive, isn't it? Because that has such an impact on how you turn up to those meetings or those scheduled calls, and how you then are able to put your best foot forward, negotiate a good outcome for yourself and all of that kind of thing. It sounds like it's really pivotal to understand the difference between what's happening historically in your body and what's actually you're confronting in the here and now.
Exactly, yeah. And that, the trauma therapy that I do using EMDR mostly now is all about that. It's all because the way we would think about it is that those two parts, the younger self part and the current present self, aren't in contact with each other because of the way that the brains are laid out. So the EMDR, the eye movement work, the bilateral stimulation, we're stimulating the involvement of the left brain, right brain, left brain, right brain, left brain, right brain, and you're facilitating the flow of information around the brain so that the knowledge that actually this is the present can get to the part of the brain that still feels much, or part of you that feels much younger.
So just to recap briefly for people who haven't heard of EMDR before, it's eye movement desensitization
and reprocessing.
And the theory there, as you've just said, is that you're disrupting the typical pathways between the left brain and the right brain so that information flows better between the two hemispheres.
Yes, it's something we call adaptive information processing. The idea is that information, knowledge that actually that you're safe and safe enough in the present has got stuck, and that so the various parts of the brain are not communicating with each other smoothly enough. And so one of the things we're doing is just facilitating that.
And that can help when you've been traumatized or you have post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever. It can help in a range of trauma experiences.
Yes.
Yeah. So does this mean all divorces are potentially traumatic then, if we're pulling in previous traumas and loading them onto the current situation?
Hopefully not, but I'd imagine it's something that one should certainly be aware of. Trauma, as well as being a physical experience, it's like time travel. The other thing about the amygdala, as I said, which is the alarm system, the bit of the brain that gets engaged when during a trauma or a stress, it doesn't understand time or place. So when that part of the brain takes over and puts you through the survival process to get you out, you can go back in time. And I think you can go back to these earlier times, these earlier states of yourself, these earlier times where you were frightened or helpless and powerless. And the more aware, it doesn't just happen in divorce. I mean, people, this happens all the time. And I think the more aware one can become of those younger parts, but also of how to get yourself back into the present and live in the present and respond, the better. Because given within an obviously very stressful process such as going through a divorce, there's potential there, I'd imagine, for being triggered all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you're trying to do things amicably, which is obviously the bit that we're trying to help people with. But it's interesting, isn't it? I guess the other part of what you do, or the big part of what you do, is linking that trauma to the physical dissipation, if you like, of trauma through Pilates. Just explain for people who may not have come across Pilates before we sort of get into that link. What does Pilates do on a sort of general basis? And then let's talk about the link between Pilates and trauma.
Sure. Well, it's an exercise system that was developed by Joseph Pilates in the 1920s. He was from Germany originally, but he moved to America, to New York, and set up a studio. And he'd been very unwell as a child. I think he'd had asthma, he'd had rickets, I think, as believed as well. And he developed this system over time, of an exercise system, which was, he initially envisaged it as for the rehabilitation of professional dancers or athletes who'd been injured. And it's evolved over the years to the system we know today. And it's all about really developing bodily awareness, developing core strength, developing flexibility, developing strength through the moving body. It can look from the outside quite a bit like yoga. It's not yoga. It's a different thing. There's more of a focus on the core, I imagine. And it's all about using body weight exercises primarily. If you using the mat version, there's also Reformer, which uses machines. And it's one of the best forms of exercise for chronic lower back pain, which is why one of the things I got interested in it, both as someone who had back pain in the past, but now works with people who have it. And it takes about you just need a mat, and a lot of it is done lying on the floor. You're engaging your core. We start off with posture. It's all about finding a kind of the neutral pelvis, the correct sort of position to have your pelvis and your hips and your back, the correct relationship between those two. Then moving the body, moving various limbs through various different exercises to try and pull the pelvis out of, to put pressure on the pelvis and the lumbar spine to come out of neutral. Then using your core, your deep core muscles, the muscles between your ribs and your hips, to keep everything in place. And it's that tension between the movement and the need to keep everything in place that develops strength. But also we place the very great, one of the most important principles of Pilates alongside centering, using the centers in the core, controlled, smooth flowing movement, breath. We work with the breath. Everything revolves around the breath from that perspective, which is very calming for the body. But we also talk about concentration and focus. You can think of it as moving mindfulness, I think, in the sense that what you're supposed to be doing, you ask your teacher through a class will always be gently sort of suggesting that you focus on the movement, you focus on the parts of the body that are moving, parts of the body that are trying to stabilize, what that feels like, the muscles, the joints, and to let go of any other thoughts that might be coming to mind. So to, as you would in a mindfulness session, just to notice that you have the thought, let it go, come back to the movement. Yes, with mindfulness, you might come back to the breath or a candle, whatever it is, but in Pilates, it's the movement. And this is a deeply relaxing kind of process as well, but also I think has potential for resolving traumas in a way too, which I can explain.
Yes, well, I'm a big Pilates fan. I do Pilates myself. So I think the whole mindfulness part of Pilates is really important and quite underrated. I think it's something that I didn't necessarily see when I first started doing Pilates, but now a lot of what we do in the classes that I go to is visualizing the movements and visualizing the muscles. And for me, it's wonderful because it's just time for my head to stop. So I can definitely see, the benefits of doing it. But what I'm really interested in to hear you speak about is link this to trauma then. What have you discovered about doing Pilates and working with trauma that really works for people?
Well, I think it's all about focus, because we quite often, if there's something stressful going on, the brain, the amygdala specifically, decides how stressful it is and how we need to respond through, as I said, through fight, flight, freeze, submit, etc. And when it's doing that, it's taking in information from a range of different sources. It's looking at what's going on in the environment. It's looking at your general emotional state. It's looking at your database of everything that's ever happened to you in the past. So it's trying to find something that's familiar, something that sort of matches what's going on at the moment. It's also listening to the body. It's listening to, there's a process called interoception, which is the nervous system telling the brain how the body is. Proprioception, which is the nervous system telling the brain where the body is in space. The interoception, or something called the sensory motor system, is sending reports up into the brain. And the tenser the body is, the more stressed it is, the more likely that the brain will interpret that you're in danger. And so we'll send out stress hormones and we'll trigger the whole process over again. But conversely, the calmer the body is, if the body is calm and relaxed, that will get signaled up to the brain, and that sort of gets factored into the equation, if you like. And so the calmer and safer the body can feel, the safer the brain will feel, and the less likely it is to trigger a traumatic response. So if you think about what we're doing in Pilates, we're moving smoothly. The smooth flowing movement, one of the principles. We're breathing. Yeah, everything moves or revolves around the breath. Long, slow, deep in breaths, out breaths. We breathe sideways, laterally into the ribs. So if everything's going properly, we're moving with control, we're moving with precision. So where things are going well, the body of somebody who's doing Pilates is moving smoothly and calmly. Now, if you get someone to really focus on the fact that the body is moving smoothly and calmly, that information then gets fed up through the nervous system into the brain, into the part of the brain that's actually kind of wired up and agitated. And it counteracts all the other information that the brain's getting. It brings you back into the present. But another side of it is that when you get triggered because you're in danger, there's a bear charging towards you, whatever it is, there's another bit of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, which gets switched off. And it gets switched off because it's the thinking bit of the brain. We learned to do this tens of thousands of years ago when our ancestors were being hunted by bears. If there's a bear charging towards you, you've got to do something. You have to get ready to fight it or run away from it or hide. You can't just stop and think. So the thinking bit of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the bit sort of behind the forehead, we learned over time to switch it off. But the problem with that is that that's also the part of the brain that knows what day it is and where you are. So the part of the brain that knows today is March the 4th, 2025, it's lovely and sunny outside. So we need to get that bit brought back on. Now, in a therapy room, I might do yourself, like I might do a grounding exercise with somebody, get somebody to get their feet on the floor, tune into the feeling of it, sitting on the chair. What can you hear? What can you see? What can you feel? Can you smell? And that engages the sensory organs in all of those areas of your body. The information from those sensory organs gets fed into the prefrontal cortex. When that information arrives there, it has to switch on to process it. So immediately you've got another bit of the brain that knows it's, that can bring you back into the present from wherever you've gone to. And I think that Pilates does the same thing. If you're doing the focusing and the concentrating on it, and this is why it's a different experience to going to the gym, which is all about, and lifting weights is all about power. Although, interestingly, trauma-informed weightlifting is now very much a thing. There's a lot of work being done about that and a lot of research being done about it. If you're moving mindfully, you're bringing your body in your awareness literally back into the present, and that can switch off the trauma signals.
So that sounds like the best tip ever then, doesn't it? If you're going through a divorce or separation, you're feeling triggered and you're feeling the physical effects of stress, one of the antidotes to that is to do some exercises, whether that's Pilates, whether it's the exercise you just ran through in terms of just sitting still, feeling the chair beneath you. It would be a mindfulness exercise, I guess we'd call it, wouldn't we? Breathing, listening to what you can hear and focusing on all of the sensory information coming in. That would be your sort of top tip for helping people confront a tricky situation like a divorce or a separation where they're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, the grounding exercise is brilliant. Just literally, if you can do nothing else, get your feet on the floor and notice your feet, send your focus down into your feet and your attention. I think is remembering the time travel and trying to get yourself back in the present, trying to make sure that the whole of your system, your nervous system, your brain, everything knows that you're back in the present. It can be like a very simple thing to do. Breathing, too long, slow diaphragmatic breathing, putting a hand on your stomach and breathing until the hand is pushed out by the abdominal muscles. Again, very good at sort of just calming everything down, because the way I explain to people is that I ask them what does it feel like when somebody just says to you, just calm down. Like if you're upset, you're agitated, somebody says, okay, just calm down. What does it feel like? It's really annoying, isn't it?
It's really annoying, isn't it? I can feel myself prickling at the very thought of the question. Yeah.
And the way I explain it is the reason for that is because the part of your brain that hears the words isn't connected to the part of your brain that's agitated. And so we can only get to the part of the brain that's agitated through the nervous system. It's not in the verbal part of the brain. And the language the nervous system uses is breath. You slow your breathing down, heart rate slows down, everything slows down and calms down. So calm signals get communicated up through the vagal nerve up into the part of the brain that's agitated. It's very simple but very effective. Again, good thing to do is just check in with yourself. Where am I breathing? Am I breathing into my stomach or am I breathing up here? Because often when you go into fight or flight, panic or stress, the breath comes up into your chest. Problem with that, and it gets quicker. And the problem with that is you get rid of too much carbon dioxide, as I'm sure you know. So in the old days, you'd be given a paper bag and told to breathe out. Yep. The reason for that, I'm sure you remember, is so that you breathe back in what you've just breathed out. So you breathe back in your own carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide has a soporific calming effect on the body. I think now we would use diaphragmatic breathing and just as calming, just doing it for a couple of minutes a day or whenever you feel stressful. It just calms everything down, brings you back into the present.
And if we're not very good at this, I guess most of us aren't very good at it. And, we've got this build up of trauma and anxiety in our bodies. What effect does it have on us? How does it manifest?
I think through a general sense of being on high alert the whole time, being agitated, can affect your sleep. It can make you quite irritable. It can get into quite bad moods. It can make you very kind of jumpy and we talk about startled responses. It can make you just very unsettled. You can notice all sorts of, as I said, that your body will tell you. The body keeps the score, obviously, the book by Bessels van der Kolk. Like if your heart rate is elevated, if your chest is tight, if you've got tension in your shoulders, your butterflies in your stomach constantly, chronic pain. And this is why there's a you can think of trauma and anxiety and stress as being stored in the body as chronic pain, particularly around the hips and the lower back, which is another reason that I use Pilates to work with people with back pain alongside the therapy. And I think if you're a general sort of sense of agitation. If you find yourself, as I said at the beginning, remembering earlier experiences, if there's certain things, like every time you get an email or you get a phone call or a message from your former partner, you find yourself tensing up, irritable. Also, I think, if you're starting to drink more than you used to, possibly, or to eat more or less than you used to do, getting irritable with the people around you, those kinds of things, getting sort of quite tearful. If it's disturbing your sleep, as I said, not sleeping well, having strange dreams too, it does get into your subconscious in that way. It's worth paying attention to what's going on.
And if people are experiencing this kind of thing, what are some of the practical things you can point them towards? So obviously, best case scenario, they come and see a professional like yourself and they have a guided kind of therapeutic all body experience, don't they? They can go through the mental side of things, the physical side of things, and that's great for some people. But if people can't afford it or there are barriers for them doing that, whether that's time or whatever, what sort of things can people engage in themselves to damp down some of this trauma when they're going through a divorce or a separation?
Walking, to be honest with you, is one of the best things you can do. It's an
Big
incredibly
fan of that.
it's a wonderful form of exercise. Doesn't put any pressure on your joints, but also mentally, it does relax people. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of you've got a problem at work, something you can't work out what to do, and you go for a walk, and then you forget about it, and suddenly you get a flash of inspiration. Okay? It's called hypofrontality. This effect is a recognized neurological effect, apparently. It happens because there's something about that level of cardio exercise that creates chemical changes in the brain. So again, the left brain, right brain barrier kind of dissolves, and you get access to more ideas and thoughts and perspective from the usually unconscious right hemisphere of the brain, get into your left brain, more logical left brain, where you do most of your thinking. Right? So you can get different ideas. Read a book once, said that Charles Darwin had a circular path mapped out in his garden because of this, because he'd recognized that that's where he got all his best ideas from, was going for a walk. But if you're troubled by something, getting out, there's something about that low level of cardio, you'll get different perspectives on the issue. You'll get endorphins and dopamine, etc., released through the exercise. You'll also get different perspectives. So I think if you can do nothing else, doing that or going for a swim, doing something that involves that level of cardio involvement. There's some great work has been done. There's a wonderful book called Walking Your Blues Away. I can't remember the author's name. Apologies. And he's talking about, because obviously if you're walking, it's left side, right side, left side, right side, left side, right side, which does have a similar kind of effect to EMDR, again to this bilateral stimulation that we would call it. So there's quite a lot going on in walking, and it's completely free, and you can walk anywhere.
I can't go to work without a walk. I just can't. I have to do it early in the mornings because I think the light's good in the morning, and then it just helps me focus on the day. And you're right, sometimes it just helps me clear my head and I can think more strategically and clearly if I've had that little bit of time to myself in the morning. And there is something about the left, right, the sort of, not the plodding, because I'm walking quite quick, but the kind of, there is something about the rhythm of it that actually is quite mindful and restful. Now, but the big question I always get asked is to listen to a podcast or not listen to a podcast when you're walking. Do you get the benefits or do you need to be quiet?
Yeah, it's a lot of debate about this. Personally, I don't listen to anything. I just walk when I just notice where my head goes to. But I know other people love to have something to listen to distract. Whatever works for you. I mean, really, whatever works to help you feel calmer and better. I think also mat Pilates itself is very accessible. You literally just need a mat. You don't need any other equipment or very little other equipment apart from that. Maybe a block or a cushion to put under your head.
And there are sessions online and all sorts of things now, aren't there? So you can just tap into beginners Pilates and on YouTube or whatever.
But I think also reaching out to other people who might be going through the same thing. I think that the most powerful form of support really is to be around other people who are going through or have gone through what you've gone through. This is why your podcast and the whole, this is great because it's breaking down the isolation. I imagine that people can feel that you're on your own with it. I think is because of the difficulties. So reaching out, I think if you can get to a therapist, it's very helpful to have somebody to be with you as you go through it. But if reaching out to other friends or people that you know or family members who may have been through it and talking about what's going on.
What does the process of talking do Somebody tried to describe this to me the other day. So when you talk about something, how does that help?
Oh, that's a good question. I have had many clients over the years said there's something about putting something into words that kind of lessens the power of it. That if somebody's carrying an anxiety about something or a worry in particular, and they actually you can help them articulate it. People might say, well, actually, now that I've said that aloud, maybe it's not quite so bad as there. I think that there's another Greek idea of catharsis. The telling of the story does lead to a release, and this is why and people find writing very helpful as well. Some people would rather like just write down what they're journaling. I think that's why people get diaries. Sometimes it's something very therapeutic in the sense of releasing through putting something in, because also once somebody else has heard it, that other person heard whatever worry it is that you have, they can help you think about it and possibly look at it from a different perspective or find different meaning in it, etc. So I think there's something very, as much as I now principally practice EMDR, I am talking therapist, psychotherapist therapist originally, and I still do a lot of that work. And there's something incredibly powerful about just putting things into words and realizing that once it's been put into words, it's possibly not quite as scary as it might have been.
Yeah. I think it's something about it kind of breaks it down into a rational thing, doesn't it? Rather than just a big emotive fear. And I think, like you say, it's that process of releasing the energy that a negative feeling holds within a body, isn't it? That actually, once it's out there, it feels more manageable in some way. I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, it's been fascinating chatting, Andrew. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your guidance. If you had to give somebody a top tip, then they're listening to this, they're going through divorce, they're feeling very emotionally overwhelmed. There's one thing you're going to tell them to do. What would you say?
Get your feet on the floor. Tune into the feeling of that lovely feeling of gravity, very gently pulling your feet down into the floor. Notice a slight heaviness or possibly a tingling feeling. Yeah? Get your feet on the floor, then notice what it feels like to sit. Take that feeling up, you're sitting on the chair, your back against the backrest. Tune into the feeling of being held on the chair by gravity. Tune into, close your eyes, tune into the sounds around you. Any smell or scent. Maybe open your eyes a bit later on, look around the room, study what you can see, study the furniture, shapes, patterns, colours. Tune into the sensory experience of the body and the space where you are. Slow your breathing. That will calm you down. It will bring you back into the present.
Sounds like brilliant advice. Thank you. Where can people find out more about you, Andrew, if they want to hear more about how Pilates and trauma and divorce can all link?
So my website is traumaandbackpainrecovery.com. And if you go there, there's much more information about my work, blog posts, details about how to contact, etc. So the and is AND.
Well, it sounds like a fantastic service. I think people should head there and take a look, particularly if there's something that they're bringing from a previous life experience into their current difficulties, divorcing or separating. So thank you very much indeed for sharing that. If you're looking for more general advice on co-parenting or separation or divorce, then you can visit the Amicable website at amicable.co.uk, where you can explore all of our free resources, or you can book a free advice consultation. And of course, you can hear more about new podcast episodes by subscribing for updates and visiting thedivorcepodcast.com, or you can find us on your favorite listening platform too. Finally, we'd love to know how we can help more. So please share your questions on divorce, separation, and co parenting with us at hello@amicable.co.uk. Thank you ever so much, Andrew, for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for listening.